The U.S. President Donald Trump, in the last minutes, putting out a lengthy statement, which he talks of the lifting of the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. For more, we turn to Douglas Herbert from our International Affairs Desk. Doug, this is once again one of these statements that has both threats and promises.
Yeah, there's more, and Francois, there's more that we don't know at this hour than we do know. Look, we've heard in recent hours, over the past 24 hours or so, that both sides were, according to U.S. officials at least, approaching what they call a memo of understanding. That is a memorandum which would provide a framework for extending the ceasefire up to 60 days, a period during which they would then be able to really hammer out and negotiate the much tougher issues, notably the fate of the nuclear program, the stockpile of enriched nuclear materials, so on and so forth. At this hour, the fate of all of this and the fate of the negotiations themselves remain very unclear. All we have is exactly what you just reported at the outset. Trump going into the Situation Room of the White House, and that can mean any number of things, but I think it's important to note the fact that Iranian officials have not confirmed that an agreement is imminent. What we are reporting at this hour is based on a succession of statements put out by Trump, by his administration, and also notably in a just posted social media post on his Truth Social network. So this is all, in a sense, one version. It's almost putting a little bit the cart before the horse, in the sense that perhaps is a little wishful thinking. The U.S. officials come out hard, making certain points, hoping that everything else will fall into place and follow. But I do note that the Iranians have been explicit that they will not agree to what they have called, and I quote, excessive U.S. demands. And when they use the word excessive, that might have things to do with nuclear, or even terms of if they don't lift the blockade fully, what happens next. So while they might have an understanding, there seems to be a lot of room for misunderstandings within that memo of understanding.
All right, in that Truth Social post, calling for a nuclear deal, also stating that the release of frozen assets for Iran won't happen until the Iranians sign on the dotted line.
Could this be the showstopper? I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but the Iranians have been very explicit. The frozen assets, and we're talking billions of dollars of assets which are frozen in Western banks that the Iranians really quite desperately want and need access to. This has been a real, reportedly a real sticking point, a clincher, and a hurdle so far in the negotiations. And the U.S. officials have noted, have hinted and signaled very strongly that while they would be able to offer not just unfreeze some of those assets, they would do so in staggered phases, with each successive unfreezing of more assets depending on the degree to which, from their perspective, the Iranians were sticking to their commitments to open up commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear issue, so on and so forth. And even with this key sticking point, beyond sanctions, beyond frozen assets, even with the Strait of Hormuz, with everyone right now focused on how do you get that open again, the Iranians have so far, at least so far, not backed away from their repeated assertions that no matter what happens in the next 30 days with the Strait of Hormuz, presumably it could be reopened to commercial traffic, they would still retain some sort of control, administrative control, perhaps in concert with Oman across the Hormuz there, and perhaps on who can pass through and under what terms. They would essentially have to give a green light to ships to pass through. And this could become a real sticking point with the U.S. administration, which wants no conditions attached to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.